I am investigating the topic, are we using wind power effectively as a renewable energy resource in Western Australia? Western Australia houses a third of the country's coastline, measuring a massive 20,781 kilometres, and accommodates a high percentage of some of the windiest towns in Australia. With these two factors in mind, along with positive research and statistics, it makes sense to use wind power. Having lived in a coastal town where wind farms have operated for years, it was interesting to learn that some of these wind farms are becoming redundant once their use-by date approaches. It appears that wind farms are becoming more prevalent overseas, both onshore and offshore. However, in Western Australia, it appears that we aren't taking advantage of our weather and coastal conditions. I initially planned to carry out a search using Google as the search engine and using the keywords Western Australia and wind farms. I then planned to do an expanded search using Google Scholar as the search engine using the keywords Western Australia, wind farms, impacts and sustainability. This was linked to the Curtin Library. I plan to target the Journal of Environmental Policy and Planning and the author Richard Hindmarsh. So far, I have carried out what I plan to do with a few adjustments to my research questions, and I have tried to not rely so heavily on government websites as the information could potentially be biased. A major problem I have encountered is the lack of research and credible resources relating to Western Australia within the last 10 years. There are massive amounts of information for Australia and other countries, but very little for Western Australia that could be termed unbiased. I did find Google to be useful in my initial searches and Google Scholar and the Curtin Library in providing educational sources. However, these databases did not provide much specific information related to Western Australia. I have found out that Western Australia houses a third of the country's coastline and has some of the windiest towns in Australia. Wind farms are one of the cheapest and most available forms of renewable energy, yet current wind farms are being closed down. I also found out that the Australian government has an agreement that by 2020, 20% of Australia's electricity is supposed to be produced by renewable energy. Finally, I have found out that overseas countries are increasing their use of wind farms, both onshore and offshore, yet Australia is lagging behind. I need to investigate why there isn't more being done to encourage the use of wind power as a renewable energy resource in Western Australia. In a 2004 report by the WA Planning Commission, they suggested a combination of climatic conditions and state and Commonwealth incentives should make wind power an attractive source of renewable energy for a variety of purposes. The report goes on to list many advantages that wind farms could provide. If this is the case, then why, over the last 12 years, haven't more wind farms been established in WA? We have a rapidly growing population, placing greater needs on energy resources, so why aren't we taking advantage of wind power? A report by the WA Planning Commission and research by Hindmarsh list concerns ranging from environmental, aesthetics, cost and social issues. The year level for this inquiry would best suit Year 6. Firstly, it relates to science understanding, specifically physical sciences, because the two key concepts are how forces such as wind affect the behaviour of objects and how that energy can be transferred from one object to another. Secondly, this topic would also relate to science as a human endeavour, because it gets students to use their scientific knowledge to explain how and why we might change our sources of electricity by looking back at past and present use of fossil fuels compared to renewable energy resources. Finally, it relates to the use and influence of science concepts, because it is asking students to consider why we should use wind power and sustainable energy as a form of electricity in Western Australia, Australia and the world.